You want to play better guitar solos, don't you? Of course you do. And one of the key elements to achieve that is learning how to target chord tones along the way. Now, I've done a series of videos a while back pertaining to this, but I thought I would do another one to kind of condense down the idea and get you started with this concept. Let's check it out. So before we get started, a couple things might come to mind, and those two things are, why would I bother to focus on chord tones? And the answer to that really is, consider the scale that you're playing, the playground. And the chord tones are the coolest toys on that playground. Obviously, you want to get to those as fast as you can. The other question is, how do I get started with this? Well, I would say to make it easier to digest and less overwhelming, start small with one chord at a time. Okay, so for this example, we're going to play over one chord. We're going to play over a D major chord in our imaginary backing track. And the concept here is quite simple. To get started with chord tone targeting, start with one chord like D major and consider what scale you want to use. So just to keep things really simple, we're going to use the D major scale. Kind of a no-brainer, but it's going to make this easier to illustrate. So if our overall chord is going to be D in our backing track, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a scale shape for our D major scale. I'm going to go to the 7th fret area and I'm going to use what I call shape 6. All that means is that the lowest note I'm going to hit, possibly hit, is the 6th note of the D major scale, which happens to be B. So I continue from B all the way up the strings, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A, and B, C sharp, D. So that's going to be my playground, so to speak. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to construct lines by looking at and visualizing a very small chord shape for D. And one of the most obvious ones I can think of is right there, the 7th fret across strings 4, 3, and 2. You have a full D triad. So right there is, if you strum it as a chord, you'll get a perfectly viable D chord. The idea here is we're going to use those notes as a visual scaffolding to create our lines around. So here's a good example. Let's just start super simple. Let's start on the A, the 5th of the D chord. And we're going to play A, we're going to hit B, which is also in our scale, and then we're going to land on D and stop. Now you've heard stuff like that in intros to solos or at any point along the way. Super simple, 3 notes. But right away we've already used 2 chord tones, the A and the D. Obviously you're going to want to expand upon this, so maybe let's do something like this. Let's hit the F sharp from the scale, from the chord, and let's come down the scale back to D. So we'll go so F sharp, then we'll come back down to E, and then D. Now we're starting to sound like a musical phrase. It doesn't sound like we're playing a chord, or an arpeggio for that matter. Threw in a little extra something there. I played the original phrase, and then I went to E, and I bent E back up to F sharp, which was previously played right here on the 2nd string, 7th fret. So again, everything I'm playing here is based on me targeting those D major chord tones, the D, the F sharp, and down here, the A. But it doesn't sound like a clinical phrase. It sounds like, well, music, hopefully. All right, let's take a look at another example. We're going to stay within the same box shape, I guess you could say. Let's expand our view of the D major chord shape though. So instead of just, let's add that little triad right there. So we're going to borrow the F sharp that we used from the previous box. We're going to stay on that string and grab the A on the 2nd string, 10th fret, and the D on the first string 10th fret. So if you want to look at it as an extended arpeggio from the first one, you'd have this. All D major chord tones. But for this example, we're going to stay within just those two strings for a second. Here's a phrase that you might want to consider. So we'll start on the D. We'll start on the root note. Cool thing to do is hit neighboring tones. So a neighboring tone is literally what it sounds like. If you're on D, a neighbor would be any chord tone, or sorry, any scale tone to the left or to the right of D. In this case, we could go up to E, or we could go down to C sharp. Both of those notes, the E and the C sharp, are neighboring notes to D. So let's play with that for a bit. So there's a phrase that uses not only the root note, but I accentuate it by using the neighboring tones to get there. Notice I hit B, which is a scale tone. C sharp is a scale tone. They're weaker notes over the D chord, but I'm using them to get to or target the stronger root note in this case. So again, a simple, short phrase, but you can start expanding upon this. So when you go to practice this idea, at first I would say don't even worry about timing in terms of like a metronome or a backing track necessarily. Just start experimenting by visualizing the notes of the chord, knowing the scale shape you're going to use, and start small. Start, brick by brick, piecing together potential phrases that hopefully you can remember and use in your improvising. Okay, so let's take that lick again and we'll see if we can expand upon it. Okay, so you can hear the original phrase. Now to come and complete it, I'm going to come down, release the bend to C sharp, down to B, and then A on the second string, 10th fret, down to F sharp. Both of those are chord tones again. Okay, so there's one possible way to extend it. Let's add something else. Okay, so now I'm going back to the territory of the first phrase that we did, but that's how this is going to go. You're going to expand into different areas string-wise and fretboard-wise, ultimately also in a linear way as you get better at this concept. But again, just to learn how to target notes of any chord at all, it's good to start with one and just get your foot, in the door, get your toe in the water a little bit. So. Okay, now there, added something else. These two notes, even though we didn't really talk about them in this particular thing, well, we did, we talked about them as this. But what I did is I took the F sharp from our original chord shape and I placed it on the third string, 11th fret, keeping A exactly where it was. So that's probably a lick you've heard a lot in different contexts. The reason why it works so well, especially in this case over a D chord, is the F sharp and the A that we started with are from a D chord. These are not chord tones, these are scale tones, E and G. But what we're doing here is we're seeing chord tones as strong, we're seeing the scale tones as like, I guess almost like a lily pad that you're jumping to get to the next chord tone. And there we are again, back to our sevens, our third string D and second string F sharp. So this is the basic idea. You can do this with any chord. Obviously we didn't really gather much info from the lower strings in this case, but I do want to keep things fairly concise here. But by all means, you can travel to the lower strings and start messing with as well. So there's a few chord tone licks there. So that's the basic idea. Check out some of the other videos that also pertain to this concept. I'm going to do another one or two in terms of building this up more gradually from 1 chord to 2 to 3, so you can really get a good handle on what's going on with this idea. And hopefully you'll start to see results of this pretty quickly.